You know, Brandon Herrera is running for Congress in Texas District 23. He's running against a guy named Tony Gonzalez, and there has been a big scandal that has been casting a shadow over the entirety of the primary race between Brandon Herrera and Tony Gonzalez, and that's because there are allegations against Representative Tony Gonzalez, who is currently the incumbent candidate in Texas 23 that Brandon's running against. The allegations are kind of serious. They come from the Daily Mail, and the Daily Mail says the married congressman had an alleged affair with Aide before she lit herself on fire. And then the police are blocking the release of the 911 call and other evidence. Now, as far as I'm aware, as of time of recording this video, Tony Gonzalez has not yet commented on the scandal. However, the family of the woman who he was alleged to be in a relationship with has denied any relationship existing between Tony Gonzalez and the aide, whose name I won't bring up too much because she died. And while I think it's important to talk about the effect this is going to have on the race, I also feel bad for her family, and so I'll try to refrain from saying her name throughout this video. That being said, the scandal is huge, and I think it's going to actually give Brandon Herrera the edge to win here. And that's not just me saying it now, because I was scrolling through Twitter the other day and I saw Tony Gonzalez posted a picture of him visiting Grassfield Farm in Hondo, Texas. And the reason I saw this was because I followed the Fat Electrician on Twitter, and he responded to it with this article screenshot. Exclusive: GOP rep could be in big trouble if public learns more about alleged affair partner setting herself on fire. I immediately looked up this article, and it's actually quite well done, and I think that it lays out exactly how this might affect the race. But first off, I just want to mention that, like all of these headlines say, everything is alleged. As of now, there's nothing proven about Representative Tony Gonzalez, and because these are allegations, you should treat this video as unverified rumor, and you should read the primary sources, see what the Daily Mail's reporting, and make up your own mind as to whether or not you believe the allegations. Now that the disclaimer's over, let's take a look here at the Daily Caller's article. Exclusive: GOP rep could be in big trouble if public learns more about alleged affair partner setting herself on fire. And this is an article in the Daily Caller written by Ashley Brassfield. It starts off with Republican Texas rep Tony Gonzalez's support from GOP primary voters after they learn of his alleged affair with a district staffer, according to a new Trafalgar Group poll obtained by the Daily Caller. Gonzalez's regional district director set herself on fire in her backyard in Uvalde, Texas in September before succumbing to her injuries at the hospital. Gonzalez was allegedly having an affair with her, according to more than half a dozen sources who spoke to 24/7 News and the Daily Mail. Gonzalez has not publicly denied having an affair. And then here they show a Twitter poll by Bricksuit. So if we go here to the original source, you'll see Bricksuit, who is a Republican, therefore the people voting in his poll are probably lean Republican, especially because he's famous for going to Trump rallies dressed in a brick suit. He said, has the recent scandal involving Congressman Tony Gonzalez, and I'm going to add an allegedly in here, Bricksuit did not put that in this tweet, allegedly had an affair with his married staffer, which may have been a factor in her death via self-immolation, led you to prefer Brandon Herrera in the Texas 23 Congressional District? Who would you support, Tony Gonzalez or Brandon Herrera? Tony only got 1.4%, whereas Brandon got 98% of the vote, which is a landslide. But like I said, Bricksuit is not exactly a non-biased source. His audience almost certainly skews towards, America First Republicans, which Brandon Herrera is. So I would expect to see Tony Gonzalez lose any poll put up by Bricksuit, whether or not the allegations against Tony Gonzalez are brought up. If we go back to the article and we take a look at this section here, they're talking about a Trafalgar Group poll, which is an actual poll done by pollsters, not a Twitter poll done on Bricksuit's Twitter. They say that the Trafalgar Group poll conducted on October 26th to the 29th on behalf of an outside organization not connected with either campaign, asked Texas 23rd District voters whether they were aware of reports that Gonzalez, who was married, was having an affair with one of his congressional employees, and that employee recently died by setting herself on fire. Of the 503 likely Republican primary voters polled, 46% say they were unaware of the reports of the alleged affair between Gonzalez and his staffer. A follow-up question asked if voters were aware that Gonzalez is subject to an investigation by the House Ethics Committee for violating rules for allegedly having an affair with an employee. House rules prohibit members of Congress from engaging in sexual relationships with staff. The House Ethics Committee declined to comment on whether they had opened an investigation into Gonzalez when reached by the caller. Gonzalez's office did not respond to a request for comment. Respondents were then asked how the alleged affair and potential ethics investigation impacted their support for Gonzalez. 49% said they were less likely or much less likely to vote for Gonzalez in the primary after learning about his alleged misconduct. Trafalgar conducted a separate poll on October 31st through November 1st that shows Representative Tony Gonzalez leading the Texas 23rd primary election with 40.4% support, followed closely by challenger Brandon Herrera, an entrepreneur and Second Amendment activist, at 35.2%. 0.2% of the vote, with the remainder of voters undecided. And we're going to go and take a look at this poll. So if we go here to the Trafalgar Group Twitter account, you can see this is what they posted. They said 40% for Tony Gonzalez, 35% for the AK guy, which is Brandon Herrera, and 24% of the likely primary voters, these are people who live in the district, are undecided, which is a huge amount of undecideds in a race where there is an incumbent, right? That doesn't bode well for the incumbent if there's so many people who are already saying, I don't know if I'll vote for that guy, because the incumbent usually is the default choice. So if somebody's not choosing Tony Gonzalez already, I'd say a decent amount of these votes will go towards Brandon Herrera. But unfortunately, I can't exactly see the future, so I can't say that for sure. We can go here, we can actually take a look at their poll report. We can see the details. They asked 605 people within the district, and this is the area that they were surveying people in. Likely Republican primary voters, so these are people who are motivated to vote in the Republican primary. They got a 3.1% response rate, which is horrible, but for polls, that's actually pretty good. Nobody wants to talk to a pollster. They got a margin of error of 3.9%. They have a 95% confidence rating. The response distribution was 50%. So if we go down here, we take a look at this. This is the results they were talking about, 40% to 35%. And then if we add in the margin of error being approximately 4%, that means that this race is pretty much tied, right? If you add 4% to Brandon Herrera's thing here, you get 39%. If you take 4% away from this, you get 36%. So it's about a dead heat no matter which way you do it, because likely it'll fall somewhere in between the margin of error. And because of that, who knows? It's kind of a toss up, right? It all depends on these undecided voters, which make up a massive amount, way more than I would have thought would exist in a primary election in Texas. But I think one of the reasons for that could be explained down here. This graph here shows the ages of people who participated in the polls. You can obviously see that the vast majority of people who responded were over the age of 65, because young people don't answer their phones, and if they hear a pollster, they're just going to hang up. That being said, they had 5% of young people. I think that Brandon Herrera's voting group actually falls closer to 18 to maybe 40-year-olds. I don't know that he's a big win with the 65-plus-year-olds because, you know, I love Brandon, but he's a little bit controversial. His content's a little controversial, and it's very easy for an opponent like Tony to pull some clips out of context and run them as an ad on Fox News and reach these 65-plus voters who will then not know how to check on YouTube to see what Brandon's about because they're, you know, 65-plus. So I think that this group will overwhelmingly go for Tony Gonzalez, especially because he's the incumbent, and a lot of people who just go to vote, they just check the box for the incumbent. I feel like if they got a heavier sample of people who were in this age range between 18 and 40, you would see a much higher rate of Brandon Herrera votes. And I think Brandon would probably come out on top in this primary. So it's interesting to see how this shapes out and how close of a race it already is. But if we go back to this article, you'll see that they actually had a little more information about the poll. The Daily Caller says, however, the alleged affair and the surrounding scandal has the potential to flip the race, the Trafalgar poll obtained by the Caller indicates. So this is a different poll. When voters are informed of the alleged affair, along with Gonzalez's support for fully investigating President Donald Trump's rhetoric and actions on January 6th, and Herrera's charity work for veterans, Gonzalez's lead disappears. 43.9% of likely GOP primary voters said they would vote for Herrera, and 32% said they would vote for Gonzalez after learning the new information about the candidates, and that puts Brandon in the lead, right? That has Brandon winning the primary. Of course, even at 43%, it would still have to go to a runoff in Texas because they have a weird runoff system. Don't get me started. That being said, I don't know how much of the actual effect here. I'm sure some of the effect, especially in Texas, a deep red, you know, religious state like Texas, I'm sure the allegations of an affair have a lot of weight down there, but also just the fact that he's a Republican who's grandstanding on January 6th rubs everybody the wrong way. I mean, that's just generally off-putting to the Republican voter. Meanwhile, Brandon Herrera does charity work for veterans. So if you tell somebody, oh, this guy does charity work for veterans, and then, oh, his opponent, Tony, well, he wants to investigate Trump, you know, the guy you voted for in the last election, Tony doesn't like him. Obviously, that's going to affect people's perception. And I think hopefully Brandon comes out on head because we want somebody who would support Trump, who supports America first, to be honest, not just Trump. 2028, Donald Trump can't run again, and we're going to need other leaders to rise up in the Republican Party because as the recent elections in like New Jersey and New York City showed, without Donald Trump at the lead of the ballot, the Republicans fail horribly. We need somebody like Trump to come up, and that could be Brandon. It could be Pete Hegseth. It could be JD Vance. I think it's most likely going to be JD Vance that's going to be the next leader of the Republican Party, but who knows? That could change. That being said, I'd be remiss to end this video without once again mentioning the results in the last election where there was no alleged scandal affecting Tony Gonzalez like there is in this race. And that's that in the last election, Brandon Herrera ran against Tony in the primary, just like he is now. And in the first round of voting, Brandon got 24% to Tony's 45%, which caused the runoff election. We go down here to the actual runoff election, which is what matters. And Brandon only lost by 1 point, right? That's like 400 votes, 15,023 votes to 14,669 votes. And this was when Tony, you know, he was still not a super pro-Trump Republican, but he didn't have any of these allegations surrounding him. You know, he was just a run-of-the-mill rhino Republican at that point. Now with all this stuff going on, I don't know how he could possibly turn this around. I think Brandon has this in the bag. That being said, don't get too cocky, because when people get too confident that somebody's going to win, then they tend not to vote, and then your candidate ends up losing. So we need to get the vote out for Brandon Herrera. We need to make sure that people know who he is and what he stands for, and then they can compare Brandon Herrera and his policies and his actions in the past to whatever they think about Tony Gonzalez. I'm guessing Brandon comes out of that 9 times out of 10 as the winner. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you guys think that Brandon Herrera will win this election? Do you think this alleged scandal will take down Tony Gonzalez's campaign? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching all the way till the end. Remember to like and subscribe. Have a great day, and God bless you.